Hello everyone, Ace here, and today I've decided to have yet another look at some video game history, and in the process answer the question, what exactly made Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell Chaos Theory great? First released all the way back in 2005 for the many various systems of the 6th generation as the third entry in the Tom Clancy Splinter Cell series, as well as later getting ported to the 3DS and the PlayStation 3, Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell Chaos Theory is an absolutely legendary game, one that has gone down in history as not only the very best game in the Splinter Cell franchise, but also among one of the greatest games of all time, period. And this is praise the game well and truly deserves. But to understand why this is the case, let's talk about what exactly made the game great. And the first thing that made this game great is the fact that it is an excellent example of developers taking what worked from earlier entries and polishing it all up to a mirror shine. The previous Splinter Cell games were great games in their own right, don't get me wrong, but there was a certain degree of jank to certain elements within those games. For example, the animations could be slightly off at times. By contrast, Splinter Cell Chaos Theory greatly improved the animations to quite a notable degree, to the tune that Sam Fisher's movement animations and his posture changes depending on how close enemies get, as well as the animation pausing mid-step, provided you decide to stop moving. A nice little touch that is perfectly in keeping with the stealth genre. Another element of jank from some of the earlier Splinter Cell games came in the form of items that were rather situational at best in their use. The camera jammer is a classic example of exactly this, being a useful item on paper, but in practice being rather cumbersome in operation, as well as being limited to affecting cameras. I could also point to the disposable lockpicks being slightly redundant in most situations. And then of course there is the matter of the diversion cameras and sticky cameras being two separate items, despite having very similar roles. And clearly the developers behind Chaos Theory noticed these little elements of jank as far as equipment is concerned, and addressed all of them. The camera jammer, for example, got replaced with the OCP attachment for the pistol, which discharged a directed EMP attack that temporarily disabled any electronics it was aimed at. Meaning that not only was it able to disable cameras, it could disable lights or anything that was electronic, as previously mentioned, with a single click of a button. And you still had the pistol equipped and drawn when using it as a weapon on its own right. In every way, the OCP was a massive improvement over what the camera jammer was before. When it comes to the disposable lockpicks, they were replaced altogether with a knife, which could be used to break locks, hence its role in replacing the disposable lockpicks, but it's also still a knife and therefore a very useful hand-to-hand weapon for those wanting to do a lethal approach. And of course, when it comes to the sticky cameras and diversion cameras, those two items got merged into one. All of these are examples of the game developers fixing elements of jank within the game, and directly improving the experience as a direct result. But it does also start to lead me into another thing that helped make the game great. That being all of the many new additions to the formula introduced in Chaos Theory that simply works rather well. Sam Fisher was given some new abilities as far as his moveset is concerned, as well as his equipment that greatly increased the amount of options the player had at their disposal. In terms of some of the new moves, Sam Fisher could bash doors, which enabled you to knock out enemies that were on the other side of the door, or potentially kill them if the force happened to knock them off a ledge or something. Additionally, it is of note that Sam Fisher could now melee attack enemies while hanging from a pipe, or alternatively while hanging from a ledge. Speaking of which, now is a good time to talk about the improvements of the melee system in in general, with melee attacks now being a guaranteed one-hit knockout, as well as lethal options being a thing as well, thanks in no small part to your new knife. This is an option that is at least quieter than using your pistol to kill enemies, and also of course conserves ammo, which you can then expend on much more valuable targets, like the nearest light bulb. But as I mentioned, it wasn't just new moves that Sam Fisher had now, as there was some notable improvements to his equipment. Your rifle, for example, had multiple configurations, including a 20mm sniper, a shotgun underbarrel, and a foregrip option on top of the standard launcher. You could carry two of these variants at the same time in a mission, and immediately convert your rifle accordingly. On top of that, you also had the ability to hack things from a distance. Actually, let me rephrase that. You could hack things, period, now, which was a brand new feature. But yes, on top of that, you could do it from a distance, no less, meaning you didn't have to get right in front of a computer screen to use it in most cases. It also meant that keypads as well as retinal scanners weren't quite the obstacles they once were, as you could simply hack them, though this is something that the AI could detect. Speaking of which, that's another thing that helped make the game great, the AI, which was pretty advanced for the time, having several states of alertness depending on how much noise the player made, and they were more than capable of doing things to try to thwart the player, such as tossing flares in the suspected area where the player may be hiding, or alternatively just blindly firing their weapon in a certain direction because you spooked them enough. It is also of note that if the player lets a guard go back to not being alerted, but then immediately spooks them again, that guard will then resume the heightened state of alertness they were previously at. That's not to say the AI is perfect, but there are a few tricks that also help further sell the immersion about how good they are, such as the fact that the AI constantly likes to talk to other AI, and call out whatever is going on with a fair amount of detail. It's similar to another game that I'll be covering in the What Made It Great series that just so happened to come out the same year. But this also leads to another thing that helped make the game great: the storytelling. Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell has some excellent writing and direction. It is absolutely a case of a solid story that was told very well. And while I don't want to spoil too much about this point, a great highlight has to come in the form of the interactions and players' decisions with regards to Douglas Shetland in the game, the build-up of which can be traced all the way back to Splinter Cell Pandora Tomorrow, and was slowly built up through the course of not just that game, but this one as well, making the twists that do happen be all that more impactful. So that is definitely another thing that helped make the game great. But a final element I should bring up has to be the presentation overall. In terms of the visuals, the game was so gorgeous that it was actually hard to fathom that the 6th generation consoles were capable of pulling it off the way they did. Having actually played this game, for example, on the original Xbox when it was brand new, I would have said then, and still say now, that the game feels like some sort of midway point between what you would expect from an Xbox versus what you would expect from an Xbox 360. But it wasn't just the visuals, for the sound design in the game was also stellar as well, and serves as a real undersung hero as far as the game is concerned. Playing this game with the EAX effects enabled is an absolute treat, especially if you use headphones or surround sound. It's not quite the best sound design of all time, but it is definitely up there. And so combining this all into one little package, we have in Splinter Cell Chaos Theory, a title that polished what was done before to a mirror shine, that also made additions that were leaps and bounds ahead of the previous Splinter Cell entries, that had some fantastic writing and direction, and on top of that had visuals and sound design that were as every bit formidable. With all of this in mind, this has been Ace, and I hope you'll agree when I say that Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell Chaos Theory is great.